I do know, that I was blind, but now I can see. John 9:24-25. Unwilling to leave the matter at that, the Pharisees continue. What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? The man shows some courage in replying. I told you already, and yet you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? You do not want to become his disciples also, do you? Enraged, the Pharisees charge. You are a disciple of that man, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he is from. John 9:26-29. Expressing wonderment, the beggar comments. This is certainly amazing, that you do not know where he is from, and yet he opened my eyes. The man then makes a logical argument as to whom God hears and approves. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is God-fearing and does his will, he listens to that one. From of old it has never been heard that anyone opened the eyes of one born blind. This leads to the conclusion. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing at all. John 9:30-33. Unable to refute the beggar's reasoning, the Pharisees revile him, saying, You were altogether born in sin, and yet are you teaching us? They throw him out. John 9:34. When Jesus hears what happened, he finds the man and asks, Are you putting faith in the Son of Man? The healed man responds, And who is he, sir, so that I may put faith in him? Leaving no doubt, Jesus says, You have seen him, and in fact, he is the one speaking with you. John 9:35-37. The man replies, I too put faith in him, Lord. Showing faith and respect, the man bows down before Jesus, who makes a profound statement. For this judgment I came into this world, that those not seeing might see and those seeing might become blind. John 9:38-39. The Pharisees, who happen to be there, know that they are not sightless. But what of their presumed role as spiritual guides? They ask defensively. We are not blind also, are we? Jesus says, If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say, we see. Your sin remains. John 9:40-41. Had they not been teachers in Israel, rejecting Jesus as the Messiah might be understandable. But with their knowledge of the Lord, their rejection of him is a serious sin. Pharisees confront the man who was blind. John 9:19-41-168. Pharisees confront the once blind man. Religious leaders are blind. Why are the parents of the once blind beggar afraid when they are called before the Pharisees, and how do they answer? The Pharisees become enraged at what logical argument? Why do the Pharisees have no excuse for opposing Jesus? 71-169. It is now late in the year 32 CE, about 3 years since Jesus' baptism. He and his disciples recently were at the Festival of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. They likely are still nearby? Luke 10:38. John 11:1. In fact, Jesus spends most of the remaining 6 months of his ministry in Judea or across the Jordan River in the district of Perea. Preaching is needed in these areas too. Earlier, after the Passover of 30 CE, Jesus spent some months preaching in Judea and traveling through Samaria. Then about the time of the Passover of 31 CE, Jews in Jerusalem tried to kill him. For the next year and a half, Jesus taught mainly up north, in Galilee. During that time, many became his followers. In Galilee, Jesus trained his apostles and then sent them out with instruction. Preach, saying, The kingdom of the heavens has drawn near. Matthew 10:5-7. Now he organizes a witnessing campaign in Judea. To start this campaign, Jesus chooses 70 disciples and sends them out by twos. Thus, there are 35 teams of kingdom preachers in the territory, where the harvest is great, but the workers are few. Luke 10:2. They are to go in advance into places where Jesus might follow. The 70 are to cure the sick and spread the same message that Jesus has been proclaiming. These disciples are not to focus on teaching in synagogues. Jesus tells them to go to people's homes. Wherever you enter into a house, he instructs, say first, "May this house have peace." And if a friend of peace is there, your peace will rest upon him. What is to be their message? Jesus says, "Tell them, the kingdom of God has come near to you." Luke 10. 5-9. The instructions Jesus gives the 70 are similar to those he gave when sending out the 12 apostles about a year earlier. He warns them that not all will receive them well. Their efforts, though, will prepare receptive ones so that when Jesus arrives shortly afterward, many will be eager to meet the Master and learn from him. Before long, the 35 pairs of kingdom preachers return to Jesus. They tell him joyfully, "Lord, even the demons are made subject to us by the use of your name." This fine report surely thrills Jesus, for he responds, "I see Satan already fallen like lightning from heaven. Look, I have given you the authority to trample underfoot serpents and scorpions." Luke 10. 17-19. Jesus thus assures his followers that they will be able to prevail over injurious things, symbolically trampling on serpents and scorpions. Jesus sends 70 disciples to preach. Luke 10. 1-24, 170. Moreover, they can be certain that in the future Satan will fall from heaven. Jesus also helps the 70 to see what is really important in the long run. He says, "Do not rejoice because the spirits are made a subject to you, but rejoice because your names have been written in the heavens." Luke 10. 20. Jesus is overjoyed and publicly praises his Father for using these humble servants of his in such a powerful way. Turning to his disciples, he tells them, "Happy are the eyes that see the things you are seeing. For I say to you, many prophets and kings desired to see the things you are observing but did not see them, and to hear the things you are hearing but did not hear them." Luke 10. 23-24. Jesus chooses 70 disciples and sends them out to preach. Where does Jesus preach during his final 6 months, and why does he concentrate his efforts there? How were the 70 disciples to find people? Though the 70 disciples accomplish much, what does Jesus say is of greater importance? 72. While Jesus is still near Jerusalem, various Jews approach him. Some want to learn from him and others want to test him. One of them, an expert on the law, presents the question, "Teacher, what do I need to do to inherit everlasting life?" Luke 10. 25. Jesus detects that the man is not simply asking for information. He may be trying to get Jesus to reply in a way that will offend the Jews. Jesus realizes that this man already has a definite viewpoint. So he wisely responds in a way that gets the man to reveal what he is thinking. Jesus asks, "What is written in the law? How do you read?" This man has studied God's law, so he bases his response on it. He quotes from Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18, saying, "You must love Jehovah your God with your whole heart and with your whole soul and with your whole strength and with your whole mind and your neighbor as yourself." Luke 10. 26-27. Is that the answer? Jesus tells the man, "You answered correctly. Keep doing this and you will get life." But does that end the discussion? The man does not want just a factual answer. He is seeking to prove himself righteous, to have confirmation that his views are correct and that he is thus justified in how he treats others. So he asks, "Who really is my neighbor?" Luke 10. 28-29. That seemingly simple question has deep implications. How so? The Jews believe that the term neighbor applies only to those who keep the Jewish traditions, and it might seem that Leviticus 19:18 supports that. In fact, a Jew may claim that it is even unlawful to have fellowship with an non-Jew. Acts 10:28. Thus this man, and possibly some of Jesus' own disciples, view themselves as righteous if they treat fellow Jews kindly. But they may treat a non-Jew unkindly. He is not really a neighbor. How can Jesus correct this view without offending this man and other Jews? He does so by telling a story. A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell victim to robbers, who stripped him, beat him, and went off, leaving him half dead. Jesus continues. By coincidence a priest was going down on that road, but when he saw him, he passed by on the opposite side. Likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the opposite side. But a certain Samaritan traveling the road came upon him, and at seeing him, he was moved with pity. Luke 10. 30-33. The man to whom Jesus tells this story certainly knows that many priests and Levite temple assistants live in Jericho. To return from the temple, they must travel down a road some 14 miles. That route can be dangerous, with robbers lurking along it. If a priest and a Levite find a fellow Jew in distress, should they not help him? In his story, Jesus relates that they did not. The one who did was a Samaritan, a man from a people whom the Jews despise. John 8. 48. How did the Samaritan help the injured Jew? Jesus goes on. He approached him and bandaged his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. Then he mounted him on his own animal and brought him to an inn and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him, and whatever you spend besides this, I will repay you when I return." Luke 10. 34-35. After telling the story, the master teacher, Jesus, asks the man this thought-provoking question. Who of these three seems to have a Samaritan proves to be a real neighbor? Luke 10. 25-37, 172, made himself neighbor to the man who fell victim to the robbers. Perhaps the man feels uncomfortable in answering the Samaritan, so he replies, "The one who acted mercifully toward him." Jesus then makes the lesson of his story unmistakably clear, urging, "Go and do the same yourself." Luke 10. 36-37. What an effective method of teaching. Had Jesus simply told the man that non-Jews also are his neighbors, would the man and the other Jews listening have accepted that? Likely not. However, by relating a rather simple story, using details that the listeners can identify with, the answer to the question, "Who really is my neighbor?" becomes obvious. The person who proves to be the real neighbor is the one who exercises the love and kindness that the scriptures command us to show. How to inherit everlasting life? A neighborly Samaritan. Why might a certain man question Jesus about how to gain everlasting life? Who do the Jews believe are their neighbors, and why? How does Jesus make clear the correct view of who is our neighbor? 173. On the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, about 2 miles from Jerusalem, lies the village of Bethany. John 11. 18. Jesus goes there and enters the house of 2 sisters, Martha and Mary. They and their brother, Lazarus, are Jesus' friends, and they warmly welcome him. It is an honor to have the Messiah as a visitor. Martha is eager to provide well for Jesus, so she sets to work preparing an elaborate meal. While Martha works, her sister, Mary, sits at Jesus' feet and listens to him. In time, Martha says to Jesus, "Lord, does it not matter to you that my sister has left me alone to attend to things? Tell her to come and help me." Luke 10. 40. Rather than criticizing Mary, Jesus counsels Martha for being overly concerned with material provisions. "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and disturbed about many things. A few things, though, are needed, or just one. For her part, Mary chose the good portion, and it will not be taken away from her." Luke 10. 41, 42. Yes, Jesus points out that it is not necessary to spend a lot of time preparing many dishes. Just a simple meal will suffice. Martha's intentions are good. She wants to be hospitable. But her anxious attention to the meal means that she is missing out on valuable instruction from God's own Son. Jesus emphasizes that Mary made a wise choice, one that will be of lasting benefit to her as well as a lesson for all of us to remember. On another occasion, Jesus provides a different but equally important lesson. A disciple asks him, "Lord, teach us how to pray, just as John also taught his disciples." Luke 11. 1. Jesus had already done so about 1.5 years earlier in his Sermon on the Mount. Matthew 6. 9-13. However, this disciple may not have been present then, so Jesus repeats the key point.